Hello friends, this is Reverend Paul Jansen from United Reformed Church in Somerville, New Jersey. This is the weekend of February 11th, 2024. This is the last Sunday, I guess, of the season of Epiphany. It's Transfiguration Sunday. I guess it's still within the season of Epiphany. It's the end of it anyway. Lent begins this coming Wednesday, Ash Wednesday, February 14th, also known as Valentine's Day, but it's Ash Wednesday here in the church. So, the story of the Transfiguration as found in the Gospel according to Mark, the 9th chapter, reading verses 2 through 9. After 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter and James and John and led them up a high mountain apart by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his garments became glistening, intensely white, as no fuller on earth could bleach them. And there appeared to them Elijah with Moses, and they were talking to Jesus. And Peter said to Jesus, "Master, it is well that we are here. Let us make 3 booths, one for you, and one for Moses, and one for Elijah." For he did not know what to do, what to say, for they were exceedingly afraid. And a cloud overshadowed them, and a voice came from out the cloud, "This is my beloved Son, listen to him." And suddenly looking around, they no longer saw anyone with them, but Jesus only. And as they were coming down the mountain, he charged them to tell no one what they had seen until the Son of Man should have risen from the dead. Well, I've got 3 stories for you this week, or maybe 6, or maybe 36, or for that matter, maybe 3 billion, but mostly 3. Or 6, or maybe 36. Well, we'll start with 3. Once upon a long, long time ago, after baby Moses had been tossed into the Nile and rescued, and after he murdered an Egyptian and ran away and became a shepherd, and after he saw a burning bush in the wilderness and went back to Egypt and told the Pharaoh to let God's people go, and after he led them through the Red Sea on dry ground, after all that, Moses went up Mount Sinai, and in the midst of lightning and thunder and cloud, God scratched the commandments onto stone tablets, and Moses' face lit up with the glory of God. And when he came down from the mountain, he had to put a veil over his face so that the people wouldn't be overcome. And then when Moses went back up the mountain, he put the veil, or he took the veil back off again, and absorbed rays of eternal sunshine there. Moses, the mountain, the law, the cloud, the light. Story 1. Then once upon several years later, when God was fed up with the evil that King Ahab had done, married Jezebel, built an altar to the false god Baal, and just generally irked God no end, after God had had enough, Elijah the Tishbite came virtually out of nowhere. Well, he came out of Gilead, but he came to toss a word of truth into the situation. You see, there was a drought in the land, and Ahab and Jezebel both expected Baal to bail them out. Elijah knew that was a non-starter, so he called a contest. "Ahab, you summon your hundreds of prophets to Mount Carmel, and let's see whose God sends fire." So they come, the priests do, and they set up the wood, and they parade around the pile of sticks, and they call on the name Baal hour after hour. No fire. They get tired and they start limping. Around and around they go. No fire. They start screaming, "Ah, save us, send fire!" But there's no fire. They cut themselves and they gush their blood all over the place, and they rave on, and nary a spark. Says Elijah, you think maybe your gods have had to turn off the trail and go to the bathroom for a second? Or are they just not listening? Or what's going on? Are you done now? Let me give it a try. So Elijah takes 12 stones. He calls his people together. They weren't prophets or priests, but just the people. He calls them together. They put up 12 stones, one for each of the 12 tribes of Israel. And they pile wood on top, and then they douse it with 4 jars of water, and then 4 more jars, and then ultimately 12 jars. They get everything so wet, so you got sopping wood and soaking stones and sloppy mud, and the fire of the Lord fell. Elijah called upon Yahweh, and the fire of the Lord fell and burned everything, even the mud and even the water itself. So Elijah tells Ahab, go look yonder over there, would you, toward the sea? And in a little while came clouds, and then wind, and the rain came. So there you have Elijah, the mountain, the contest, the flame, the cloud, the rain, the life. Story 2. Story 3. Story 3. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. And the light of Christ did shine in the darkness, story after story after story. Jesus' baptism, the river, the cloud, the dove, the voice, the contest with Satan, the casting out demons, healing the sick, teaching truth but with authority, telling good news about a kingdom so great that it made Herod and Caesar look like a couple of 3-year-olds in a sandbox screaming at each other about who got to play with the toy chariot. And yes, Jesus said, I am the light of the world. And even so, Herod and Caesar conspired to put out the light. And one Friday they thought, well, okay, we've done it. That's that. The end of him. But that was not that. On Sunday, the true light broke even before the sun peeked over the horizon. Darkness indeed. Psh. Even the darkness is not dark to God. The story, Jesus, the river, the cloud, the gleaming garments, the contest on Mount Calvary, the final battle, the victory. Story 3, Moses, Elijah, and Jesus. 3 stories. But did I say it might be 6? Yeah, I did. Because on what we call the day of Transfiguration, Peter and James and John were there on the mountain too. That makes 3 more stories, right? And while their stories might appear to be qualitatively different from these big names, I mean, after all, who are these 3 fishermen next to Moses, the embodiment of the law, and Elijah, the avatar of the prophets, and Jesus himself, the Son of Man, the Word made flesh? I mean, why worry about these 3 puny fishermen at all? Except for a day, not that many days after the story of the Transfiguration, they were gathered together again, just a stone's throw from Mount Zion, on a day of wind and flame and light and enlightenment and the mighty works and wonders and signs of God, a day when all of the majesty of God fell on their feeble shoulders and gave life to their feet of clay. Now Peter would have a story too, and James and John, and for that matter, you and me as well. Not 3 stories, not 6, but let's say we maybe have 30 in worship on Sunday. 36. Everyone's story. Your story too. A story for every one of you who walks, who puts one foot after the other in the light of Jesus, as Annie Dillard put it, your left foot saying glory and your right foot saying amen, in and out, upstream and down, in a daze dancing to the twin silver trumpets of praise. The story of Transfiguration, you see, is so much more than them, there, and then. It's us, and here, and it's now. It's our story. It's a story of how we, you and I, how we get lit for life. Yeah, I know. Get lit, But listen, get lit with the light of the God of Mount Sinai. With the God of Mount Sinai. I know we usually say that God gave Moses the commandments, and okay, there were 10, but it's just so much better, so much more apt a description to say that God gave Moses the 10 best ways to live. I mean, doesn't it make for a better world if we all tell the truth? Isn't life more precious when we don't murder? Wouldn't you prefer to live in a society where people honor whatever it is that belongs to whomever? I know it's not easy, but isn't the ideal to be able to honor your parents, and not just be able to honor them, but actually to honor them? And to maintain a constant reverence for God? And isn't it better if we don't confuse God with the material things that are here today and gone tomorrow? See, living this way is being a kind of light, isn't it? Not a holier than thou kind of light, but a persistent and consistent light in a world that prefers darkness. Didn't Jesus tell us, after all, let your light shine before others that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven? Get lit. Get lit with the light of holy living. And get lit with the light of the God of Mount Carmel. That light makes truth tellers of us all. Truth tellers, another word for prophets. Truth tellers of us, just as it compelled Elijah to stand in the face of the mighty and powerful King Ahab and all his prophets and all his armies, his defenders, allowed little Elijah to stand before him and say what was what. So we are truth tellers. We tell the truth. We tell the truth that the powers that be can't even hold a candle against the overwhelming light of God. You remember, don't you, what Paul said, the Apostle Paul said about those powers, the powers that be. He wrote, when he had disarmed the rulers and the authorities, he made a spectacle of them, having triumphed over them. Sounds a lot like what Elijah did, right? Made a spectacle of all the gods, sort of mocked them a little bit. But Paul was writing about Jesus. Paul was writing about Jesus. Jesus disarmed the powers. Jesus took the power away from authorities. Jesus made a public spectacle of them. And you know what they are. You know what these powers are. They're ideas that live in our heads and that take shape in the world. Ideas, thoughts that control the way we think and act and spend our money, the way we teach our children, and sometimes even the way we believe and pray. Ideas like this: might makes right. Violence solves problems. Poor people get what they deserve. Money is the key to happiness. Males were created to be the boss of females. Being white is being closer to God. Nature is here for us to use and throw away. The people of God, every single one of those little statements I just said is pure, abject, absolute baloney. There's no truth in them at all. They have no power over you. They can never extinguish the light of God in you, so phooey on them. I know they have a certain kind of power, temporary, but you, my friends, you burn with the holy passion of the everlasting God. Get lit then with the compassion of Christ. Lit with his eyes that looked at the little ones of the world and saw in them worthy, majestic, dignified people made in the image of God. Get lit with his ears that heard the words underneath people's words, ears that heard grief and anger and doubt and puzzlement, ears that heard humans being human. Get lit with his hands that touched lepers and blind eyes and unclean women and the body of a dead friend. Hands that would one day be bound to a cross. Get lit with the taste of Christ. This is a bit of an odd one, but he was in the beginning with God, said John, but he so identified with us, loved us so much, that he tasted the same death that we will all die. And get lit with his nose. The nose that could smell fake piety and sanctimonious snobbery and meanness and just plain smallness. Could smell them all a mile away. Get lit with Jesus' full-bodied compassion. Not because if you're energized that way in life, it'll make you kind of a nice person out of you, but get lit with his compassion because that's what your body is made for. To love, to care, to empathize, to feel for our fellow human beings. In other words, our bodies were made to be human beings like Christ, the new Adam, the first person in the new creation. Friends, get lit for life, because this is where life is. In giving thanks to God with holy living, in telling the truth with a holy passion, and reaching out to care as Christ reached out his arms to love. That's a life. That's a life worth living. That's a light worth shining. And that's a story worth telling. And that's all I've got for you this week, friends. May God bless and keep you day in and day out, from morning to night and in between as well. God bless you, and may the peace of Christ be with you.